Have you ever wondered what happens when arrogance meets true justice? Or how a simple interaction between a customer and a waiter can transform an ordinary night into a lesson in respect and humanity? Imagine the scenario. You are in one of the most exclusive restaurants in Manhattan. The walls, covered in dark wood and soft lighting, exude an aura of sophistication. The atmosphere is perfect. The aroma of fresh truffles mixes with that of old wines. Every dish that arrives at the table is a masterpiece, and the service is impeccable. But what you don't know is that, behind the curtains of this luxury, a much more important lesson is about to take place. It was a night like any other at La Royale, a restaurant that attracted Manhattan's elite. Inside, 3 women sat, their expensive dresses and perfect smiles hiding their intentions. They were not there to simply enjoy the food, but to be part of the scene. Rachel Montgomery, the boldest of the 3, was in her comfort zone, surrounded by wealth, power, and unshakable confidence. Little did she know that what she thought was a night of personal indulgence would turn into something completely different. What seemed like a simple dinner night would become a battle between pride and dignity. It wouldn't be the quality of the wine or the beauty of the dishes that would be remembered, but something much deeper. The way in which humility and respect, often forgotten in the glamour, can completely change a narrative. Contrary to what Rachel expected, what she would discover that night wasn't about who had the best seat in the room or who could make the most expensive meal. It would be a lesson in what really matters: people's character and how our actions, no matter how small, define true greatness. This story is not about luxury or glamour. It's about something much more important. And the real question here is, who really has power when all you have is a look and a gesture of dignity? As Rachel sat at the table, immersed in her expectation of perfection, fate had other plans. And the man she least imagined, a simple waiter, was about to change the game. His name, Ethan Clark. It wasn't just the new waiter at La Royale. He was someone who carried a story of sweat, sacrifice, and a deep love for the work he did. Not that Rachel or her friends cared about that at the moment. To them, Ethan was just a piece in the grand theater of luxury. But as they say, the truth always comes out. And that night, Ethan wouldn't be the only person who had something to teach Rachel. Respect and dignity. The value of character. La Royale was not just a restaurant. It was a status symbol, where Manhattan elites sought more than a meal. They sought an experience. For customers, a meal there was a reflection of their power, wealth, and prestige. And for the team, especially Ethan, serving these people was more than just a job. It was a reflection of the value he placed on himself and others. No matter what the customer thought, respect was the basis of service. And then the night began to take shape. Rachel Montgomery, with her luxurious attire and master-of-the-world attitude, didn't realize the subtle difference between the simple display of wealth and a person's true worth. For her, life was a game of appearances. What she didn't know was that, when she walked through the doors of La Royale, she entered a space where luxury was not just in the crystal glasses or the haute cuisine food, but also in the actions and fundamental values that people carried. Respect was not in the bill at the end of the night, but in the interactions that took place throughout it. What is real respect? In contemporary society, the idea of respect is often mixed with power or social status, especially in high-end environments like Manhattan. According to sociological studies on human behavior, the way we treat others, regardless of their position, is a direct reflection of our own character. In a 2018 article published in Harvard Business Review, social psychologists have highlighted that people who show genuine respect for others are more likely to form lasting and successful relationships, both in personal and professional environments. This is a lesson that Rachel, at that time, had not yet learned. Rachel wasn't there to make friends. She was there to enjoy, to feel superior, to enjoy the luxury that her wealth and status gave her. The waiter, Ethan, was just a supporting character to her, a cog in the big picture of her perfect world. However, what she didn't realize was that for someone like Ethan, her job represented much more than the simple task of serving food. He was there not just to do his job, but to show that, in a place like La Royale, everyone deserved to be treated with dignity, regardless of their origin or social status. The difference between respect and disdain is profound, And that's exactly what Rachel began to understand at that moment. When Ethan, with his calm demeanor and professional smile, spilled his wine and accidentally spilled some on the table, Rachel, instead of showing understanding, chose arrogance. Her reaction was immediate, a harsh criticism and a clear display of disdain. What for her was a simple failure, for Ethan it represented an opportunity to demonstrate his ability to maintain his composure in the face of pressure. This moment, when Rachel chooses to treat Ethan like a disposable object, is crucial. The psychology of human interactions teaches us that how we treat those we believe to be beneath us ultimately defines our true position. And when Rachel decided to be tough and dismissive, she revealed more about herself than she did about Ethan. Her gesture of disdain not only humiliated the waiter, but paradoxically, made her the true victim in that scenario. The humanity behind the work. Ethan's story. Although Rachel was immersed in the luxury of her life, Ethan was immersed in something deeper: hard work and dedication. He had not been born into an environment of wealth, but rather into a middle-class family, where the value of hard work was learned from an early age. For him, La Royale represented an opportunity to prove himself, not just as an employee, but as someone who believed in providing the best service possible. This commitment to excellence was ingrained in his very identity. The La Royale restaurant, founded almost a decade ago, had been created by Isaiah Clarke and her brother Ethan, who, together, had renovated the space to transform it into one of the most prestigious gastronomic destinations in Manhattan. The story of how they started is one of struggle, perseverance, and, most of all, respect. Respect for each employee's work, respect for the customers, and most importantly, respect for the food and the experience they created. Ethan knew this. He knew his job meant something much more than just serving a meal. He was offering an experience and dignity to every customer who walked through the door. But that night, in front of Rachel and her friends, he was being challenged to maintain his dignity in the face of humiliation. Although her attitude was insensitive, Ethan did not react angrily. Instead, he chose to remain calm, respectfully clear the table, and apologize, even when he knew there was no need for it. Because for Ethan, respect didn't come from the position you held or the words you said. It came from the way you treated others, even when others didn't treat you the same way. While Rachel criticized Ethan, she didn't understand that by showing disrespect, she was building a wall of separation between herself and everyone around her. She was not only humiliating Ethan, but moving away from the values that truly define a person's greatness. And it is this contrast between Rachel's arrogance and Ethan's composure that establishes the story's first major theme. Respect is ultimately a measure of a person's character. Rachel might be rich, but at that moment she was lost on the surface. Ethan, on the other hand, was there not just as a waiter, but as an example of dignity. True wealth is not in the value of a bill, but in the way we treat each other. Arrogance and consequences. The impact of our actions. When we talk about arrogance, we immediately think of an attitude of superiority. But what we often ignore is that arrogance doesn't just manifest itself in grand, ostentatious gestures. It often reveals itself in small moments, in words spoken with disdain, and in a lack of consideration for others. This lack of empathy is what really defines arrogance, and it is what eventually brings consequences that can change an entire dynamic. In the case of Rachel Montgomery, her arrogance showed itself in a subtle but devastating way. Upon entering La Royale, she saw herself not just as a customer at a renowned restaurant, but as someone who believed that the world should adapt to her desires and expectations. This is a clear reflection of a society where, often, the powerful feel entitled to disregard others, just because they have a high status. However, what Rachel didn't know was that by acting this way, she was creating a cycle of consequences that would soon turn against her. What is arrogance? Arrogance is defined as an exaggerated belief in one's own importance or abilities, accompanied by a dismissive attitude towards others. It is often seen as a form of defense, a way to protect our self-esteem, or even a way to control how others perceive us. In a society increasingly driven by image and power, arrogance is common behavior, but also extremely harmful. Social psychologists point out that although arrogance may initially provide a sense of control, it is a double-edged sword. According to the American Psychological Association, studies on the behavior of arrogant people show that they tend to have difficulty forming and maintaining true relationships. This is because, as much as these people display confidence, their dismissive and self-centered attitudes often alienate others. Behind a facade of self-sufficiency, arrogance disguises an underlying fear of vulnerability and rejection. For Rachel, arrogance was not just a reflection of her social status, but a way of asserting her position in society. She not only saw herself as deserving of the best service, but as someone who could dictate the behavior of everyone around her. This became clear when he reacted cruelly to the mistake made by Ethan, the waiter, who spilled wine on the table. Instead of treating the mistake with compassion or empathy, Rachel chose to dehumanize Ethan, treating him as if he were inferior to her. The consequences of arrogance. What really happens when we act disdainfully? When Rachel humiliated Ethan, she wasn't just doing him an injustice. She was creating a dynamic that would affect everyone around her. Arrogance, although momentarily rewarding to those who exhibit it, always carries with it the weight of its own consequences. In Rachel's case, the consequences unfolded in several directions, and the most immediate were social and emotional. First, by disdaining Ethan, Rachel not only offended a staff member, but also showed everyone in the restaurant a lack of respect. Her friends, Victoria and Lauren, although they initially laughed at the situation, soon began to realize the seriousness of Rachel's attitude. The uncomfortable atmosphere not only affected Ethan, but also the other customers who were watching the scene. Rachel's arrogance was contaminating the environment, creating a divide between her and others. Her own friends began to back away from the situation, uncomfortable with Rachel's stance. It wasn't just one person who suffered from his attitude. It was the whole environment. The impact of Rachel's arrogance also manifested itself in how others, including employees, viewed her. When Isaiah, the restaurant owner, stepped in to rectify the situation, he wasn't just defending Ethan. He was upholding the core values of La Royale, values that had been carefully cultivated by him and his brother from the beginning. By acting with authority and firmness, Isaiah not only corrected Rachel's attitude, but also made her realize the consequences of her behavior, the loss of respect and trust from everyone around her. Isaiah's reaction. Teaching a lesson about consequences and responsibility. Isaiah wasn't just worried about Ethan's mistake. What really bothered him was the lack of humanity Rachel showed in humiliating someone for such a small mistake. He knew that if he let this go, he would not only be failing as an owner, but also failing as a human being. When Isaiah approached Rachel's table, her approach was not revenge, but politeness. He didn't just want to expose Rachel's mistake. He wanted to teach her a lesson she would never forget. By explaining to Rachel that La Royale's true value was in the way everyone, from customers to employees, was treated with dignity and respect, Isaiah was directly confronting the idea that power and wealth can give people the right to humiliate others. His intervention was a direct response to the consequences of Rachel's arrogance. By taking a firm stance, Isaiah not only corrected Rachel, but also restored trust in her own restaurant and its team. He showed uncompromisingly that at La Royale, no one, no matter how rich or powerful, was above others. Rachel's redemption. Rachel's apology was not just a response to Isaiah's words, but a reaction to the consequences of her behavior. She realized there that arrogance in its purest form not only alienates others, but also weakens one's own character. Rachel tried to mask her embarrassment with a forced smile and superficial words, but her eyes betrayed her discomfort. She knew that something had changed, that she had been challenged not just by Isaiah, but by others' own perception of her. His attempt at an apology wasn't as simple as it seemed. What began as a gesture of reconciliation soon turned into a deep reflection on his own behavior. Rachel had to confront the reality that her words and actions had consequences beyond what she could control. By apologizing, Rachel was not only asking for forgiveness for her attitude, but also facing the hard truth. Arrogance never pays off in the long run. True greatness, as Isaiah demonstrated, is not in who you can humiliate or control, but in how you respect and treat others. The arrogance cycle and its consequences. Throughout this story, we see how Rachel's arrogance has had an impact not only on Ethan, but on everyone around her. Her attitude, driven by the belief that her position made her superior, generated a series of consequences that changed the course of her night. The lesson is clear. Arrogance can be momentarily satisfying, but its consequences reverberate far beyond what we can imagine. Isaiah, in standing up to correct Rachel's mistake, was not just defending a member of her team. He was restoring respect and showing that, in his view, everyone, without exception, deserves to be treated with dignity. This is what true leadership does. It upholds equity, corrects mistakes, and ensures the consequences of our actions are understood. Now Rachel knew, perhaps for the first time, that power doesn't come from wealth or status. True power comes from the respect we show others and the consequences our actions have on the world around us. Humility and forgiveness. The path to personal growth. After the confrontation, the atmosphere in the restaurant changed. The tension was palpable, but the biggest learning from the night was just beginning to unfold. What many don't realize is that true strength of character doesn't come from maintaining an invulnerable countenance in the face of adversity, but rather from the ability to recognize our own mistakes and correct our behavior. Humility, in this context, is not about putting yourself down, but about understanding that we are all fallible. Even someone like Rachel, with her immense confidence and status, was faced with a fundamental lesson. Humility is the foundation of growth. True greatness comes from recognizing that we are all human, and therefore prone to failure. After Isaiah's public reprimand, Rachel was forced to reflect. The arrogant attitude she had displayed earlier not only harmed Ethan, but also revealed to her the fragility of her own ego. However, the forgiveness that was offered by Isaiah brought her an opportunity for transformation. By accepting his apology, Isaiah demonstrated that forgiveness is not just a way to alleviate guilt, but a powerful tool for personal growth. When Rachel finally acknowledged her faults and apologized, it was not only an attempt at reconciliation with Ethan, but also a way of coming to terms with herself. She had taken an important step towards self-knowledge, and this was only possible thanks to interaction with people who acted with respect and dignity, like Isaiah. The impact of our actions. That night, what began as a simple luxurious dinner turned into a profound lesson in respect, arrogance, and true human nature. What we learn in the end is that a person's character is not measured by the amount of power they wield or the status they have, but by the way they treat others, especially when no one is watching. Every attitude, every word, every gesture has the potential to create or destroy. Respect is not something that should be demanded, but something that should be constantly demonstrated in our actions. And when we fail, as we all fail, true strength lies in recognizing our mistakes with humility, learning from them and seeking transformation, not only on the outside but, most importantly, within ourselves. Now think, how have you treated the people around you? How have your actions impacted others, visibly or invisibly? We all have the power to change the narrative around us simply by being more aware, more respectful, and, above all, more human. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about the impact of the small choices we make every day. Also share your own experiences and don't forget to leave your comment below. Let's continue this conversation.